Hi everyone, just want to do a final progress report on Winter Fantasy. I wanted to make this video a while ago, but literally 24 hours after I did the performance, I felt really ill. So yeah, here it is. I guess Happy New Year to everyone. It is currently January 1st, 2021. Feels kind of nice to say that, but anyways, Winter Fantasy, yes. So the whole learning process for this piece took 15 days, I believe. Let me double check. Yeah, 15 days. I would say if I had to perform this after day 13, I would be quite comfortable. But for me, the entire learning process took 15 days, and I did the math. That's 12 hours and 40 minutes I spent on this. Between day 15 and the performance, I looked at the piece, not every day, but I guess almost every day, but there's a couple days where I didn't touch the piece. Mostly those are just making sure everything is still in the fingers. So maybe 10-20 minutes at most spent on the piece per session. I would say maybe another 2-3 hours there. There wasn't any big changes during that period of time. There's a couple small decisions I went back and forth on, nothing major. Yeah, so that's what happened between my last practice session, that official practice session on day 15, and the performance day. Mostly just making sure it's still ready for performance. It's still in my fingers and everything. But yeah, going over the practice or the learning process. A couple things that really stood out to me was just the mental side of practicing and how important it is. Well, obviously we all know it's important, but exactly how important I didn't quite realize until I did this. How much time I spent, not rather how much time, but how much focus I devoted on just the mental side of practicing. That doesn't just mean how I'm practicing mentally, but how I approach practicing mentally. So the most important thing I would say regarding that is just being honest with yourself and having a plan. You can't really expect to just go over the technical stuff over and over and expect it to work. Obviously, if you do it enough times, eventually it will work, but it's really inefficient. What I mean by that is your brain really has to be engaged when you're practicing. And I don't just mean, am I playing the right notes? Is this the style I like? But just sorting out your practice session. What exactly are you focusing on? That's the very important thing, is knowing what this specific practice session is focusing on, and have your brain focused on evaluating your process for doing that specific thing. For example, if this practice session I am solely focused on my technique, the fingers, then I am going to be brutally honest with myself in terms of technique. Is everything good? Are my fingers coordinated? Is there anything I don't like about it? I'm not so much worried about dynamics and artistic style. If it's good, then it's good. If it's not, as long as it's not atrocious, then I'm gonna let it go. But yeah, that's the very number one thing I say that we don't talk about enough as students and teachers, and just in general, is the mental side of practicing and how to approach what your brain is actually doing when you're practicing, not just wandering off. So yeah, that's, I guess, the most important thing I have to say about mental practice. It's just to be honest with yourself and really hone in on the specific things you're working on. And that also means not honing in on too many things at once. If you're focused on technique, just focus on technique. Don't worry about all the other stuff, because there's only so much our brain can handle. If you're overwhelming it with everything, then you kind of get turned around and there's just too much to think about, and nothing really ends up being good. Everything kind of ends up being mediocre, and that's not what we want. So throughout the practice sessions, I kind of went through the piece, I think 3 times. The first time I was only focused on technique. The second time, making artistic choices, deciding what I want to do. And then the third time, I'm looking at more of an overarching connection, and looking at it more on a macro scale than a micro scale, and just making sure that the piece as a whole works and all the decisions that I've made make sense. For example, from the if I made certain artistic decisions at the very beginning of the piece, does that kind of affect how I look at the end of the piece, or I don't want there to be some kind of a disconnect there. So that's just looking at the piece on a more macro scale. So yeah, that is basically how I approached this entire learning process, was just to break it down into different small things that I'm focusing on, and just going from there. The other thing I've mentioned multiple times already is just that slow practice. We actually spend a lot more time than we realize on slow practice. Sometimes I would be spending an hour on just 2 bars, and that is by no means an exaggeration. And then sometimes the next day I would come back to that same spot and spend some more time on it. And I think that's the other thing. At some point, you're going to have to strike a balance between being a perfectionist and letting things go. And that is something I guess we're all going to have to find for ourselves. What is a good time to let it go and move on? And when is it not a good idea to move on yet? So I think that's just something we're all going to have to figure out for ourselves. For me, I know if there are some small details that I'm just not getting, sometimes taking a break from it and coming back to it later will help, whether that means the next day or the next time I'm going through the piece. So I think there's a couple spots where I was just not getting the techniques stuff down the first time through, but I knew that when I'm looking at the piece and making artistic decisions, I will have another chance to go through it. So there's a couple spots that were like that, where it was just not working, so I just let it go, and I know I have a chance later on to come back to it and work on it some more. So that comes from just personal experience, what you can let go for now and what you really, really have to fix right now, or else it's going to stay bad pretty much forever if you ignore it. So yeah, there's that aspect of practicing too. It just comes with experience. And finally, if you've watched the performance video, it's not going to be perfect. Live performances are 99.9% of the time not going to be perfect. That's just something we're going to have to get used to. I think in this age of digital media and just doing multiple takes of things and all the video and audio editing, we expect everything to be perfect, but that's just not going to be the case when you're performing. It's never going to be perfect, and especially during a performance, something we're going to have to learn to do is to just let things go in the moment and not worry too much about it. For the performance, I actually did do 3 different takes just in case something happened or something didn't turn out well, but I ended up using the first take because that was the best performance. And that's kind of been a trend with any of my recordings that I've done so far, is that the first take usually is the best. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but usually the first take is the best, just because we're not thinking about things that we could have done better, and our brain is just more focused on actually performing. So that's, I guess, why that first takes are usually the best. But of all the performance recordings that I've done, be it for competitions or for auditions and whatnot, first takes are usually the best ones for me. So the extra takes usually are just for backup in case something happens on that first take. Maybe like an airplane flew by outside and it's really loud, or something in the background I didn't catch and it was a really bad visual distraction. Then I would use a different take. But yeah, so I did do 3 takes for that performance, and the first take was the best one, and that's the one I ended up using. So I hope this entire process has been helpful, and for me it certainly was eye-opening in a very good way. Not because of I guess I did learn new things, but it's nothing I don't know before. It just showed me personally that when I do things, it helped me clear my mind, clear my thoughts, and understand my own approach to things. And for me, that was an eye opener in a very good way. So I hope these videos have been helpful for you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I will also link all the previous videos related to this winter fantasy project in the comment section below. Thank you all for following me along in this journey, and wish you a happy 2021.